Hi, we're Ralph and Lahni and welcome to another planetary calendar forecast. This month we're doing July, and I'm going to get right into reading Ralph's beautifully written forecast. He says, this month flies by thanks to a quick Mercury and a fast Venus, and most of the planets direct with no planets changing direction. On the 4th, Venus enters flirty, playful Gemini. On the 5th, Mercury enters dramatic, sweet-talking Leo, just in time for the full moon on the 8th, so summer romances are off to a good start. Beware, the full moon combines secrecy, passion, ambition, and the desire to trade up. One possibility is an optimistic future together, and the other is legal entanglements, so tread carefully.
Oh,
what do you have to say about that, Ralph?
Oh, yes. That, in fact, the fact that you have two planets changing sign, one after the other, and we mark them with letters on the 4th and the 5th. You know, the Venus changes sign, Mercury changes sign. You're going to expect a little bit of a bump there in the road whenever you get a lot of inner planets changing. And remember, these two are moving fast. Planets don't always appear to us to be moving at the same speed. So when planets are moving fast, especially Mercury, you get a lot of communication happens quickly, projects move ahead along quickly, and also when Venus moves fast, it's the same thing. Relationships, you know, your engagement with other people really moves along much more easily, more rapidly. So keep an eye on that. Now on the 8th is the full moon, and this is not the easiest full moon because the moon is in Capricorn, which is not considered an easy position for the moon because it's an ambitious full moon. See, the moon is ideally in Cancer, which means it's very loving and gushy, or in Taurus, where it takes you out to dinner, makes you a good meal. But in Capricorn, it's saying, well, what can you do for me? And that's where we like to live emotionally.
Well, and of course, Capricorn is the opposite sign of the rulership of the moon, which is Cancer. So it's kind of pushing itself into its non-classic role.
Exactly. So this really is the time at the beginning of the summer where you're thinking about your status in your emotional relationships. So as the forecast says, tread lightly.
Right. So I'll continue. From the 9th through the 15th is a string of pleasant aspects, with the 14th being the culmination with that expressive sun-trine moon following the full moon. That void of course is ameliorated by Pisces being Jupiter's traditional feminine sign, making the moon a little more self-directed with a distinctly feminine flavor.
Exactly. And that, you know, coincidentally, the 14th of July is Bastille Day. Wonderful day to celebrate. It's also considered a white circle day. Why? Because it's the sun trine moon, which means that our spiritual energy is in harmony or working easily with our emotional energy. It's also Mercury sextile Jupiter. That's the smallest planet and the biggest planet working well together. So communications related to big projects tend to move really well and easily.
And I want to mention quickly, we can't mention the void of course moon too often because people are confused about the void of course moon. Void of course means that the moon has made the last contact by aspect to a planet that it's going to make before it heads into another sign. And so generally that's accepted as a meaning that emotionally you're not sort of attached to anything, you're kind of at loose ends, you're at odds, and you know, maybe your thought process isn't really very well directed, and so it's not a great time to kind of make that pivotal decision or something like that. Or if you find yourself at your desk just going a little foggy-headed and you realize that the moon's been void of course, you've felt directionless because the moon feels directionless.
Right.
However, there are modern interpretations of this quality of being void of course that makes exceptions for the moon in certain signs, the rulership of the moon or the rulership of Jupiter.
Right.
And so that's why Ralph made the comment about the Jupiter's rulership of Pisces, maybe making that a little less of a problematic void of course moon than normal.
Exactly. You know, in other words, a void of course moon means you go out to do all your errands and for some reason they don't come together right, and then you finish your errands and you still have extra time. What are you going to do? You know, my next appointment isn't for an hour and a half. What am I going to do? That's a void of course moon. You're kind of stuck at ends not knowing what to do. But when it's in Pisces, it means, oh look, there's a bar. Let's go have a drink.
Or go dancing.
That's true. That's a good idea too.
On the 20th, Mars moves from generally introspective Cancer to extrovert Leo. So expect over-the-top turbulence just in time for the Sun to enter Royal Leo on the 22nd. By the new moon on the 23rd, every personal planet is in masculine signs, with the Sun, Moon, and Mars at the beginning of Leo within 2 degrees of each other. From this new moon through August, you will feel like you're in a stage play. The drama, the comedy, the passion, the generosity, the grand gestures, and of course, the music. Even Mercury entering practical Virgo on the 25th can't tone down because as he passes over the royal star Regulus, the lion's heart. On the 31st, Venus enters feminine Cancer. Mercury begins a sextile with the moon in watery Scorpio, chiming in with womanly perceptiveness and charm and restoring some sexual balance in the world. Nice. I think we'll need that by then.
Oh, definitely. With all these planets in masculine signs, when you get all these planets in all masculine signs or feminine signs, it really tilts the entire background, you might say. That all the background colors change on you.
Well, you know, when you think about masculine and feminine, we think of gender. But it really is about activity, dynamism. You know, is Mars, the Mars or masculine quality is one of action and dynamics, whereas the feminine quality is receptive and intuitive. And so when we have a balance, different personal planets in these different modalities, it makes us feel a little bit more balanced. But when we have everything in masculine signs, it gives us a little bit of an impetus or an impatience even to sort of get things done or to move around. Whereas if everything is in feminine signs, that's a time to kind of hang out, chill, you know, wait for inspiration to come to you.
Yeah, this is actually, in many ways, July is a very good month. There's one black box day, which means that there's kind of a day in which there's a lot of challenges, and that's on the 2nd. But there's 4 white circle days. There's the 3rd, there's the 7th, so that 1 week is going to keep you real busy. Another on the 14th, and another on the 18th. But then what happens in this later part of the month, when Mars leads the Sun into Leo, it's kind of like having a guy come by or having a girl come by who's very dramatic. And who arrives first? Their dog. Their big dog comes jumping into your house first and runs up and jumps onto your couch, and then the person arrives. That's Mars leading the Sun into the house. And when it gets there, now you've got Mars means, in Leo means it's very expressive and very dramatic. And the Sun is supporting that. Oh, he's not going to bite anyone. He likes the couch, right? And then as you go towards the end of the month, you have the new moon right past the Sun entering the moon. So now you have the Sun, Mars, and the moon all in Leo on the 23rd. Remember, this is, you know, the king. And then you have Mercury, as Lonnie said, I believe, passing over Regulus, the royal star, the heart of the line, but that's actually at the 1st degree of Virgo. And then finally, you have Venus entering Cancer. Now, Venus has been in flirty Gemini all month long. It's like you can't go any place without people wanting to flirt with you, which is not a bad thing at all. But now Venus has moved into loving, motherly Cancer, which is a very strong position for her. It's not strong because of any particular dignity, as we call it, like a planet rulership. It's just strong because Cancer is a very intimate sign, and Venus is one of the intimate planets. And in a situation like this, where there's all this masculine energy around, to have mom showing up wearing a beautiful dress stops the whole scene. She's carrying food, too.
Yeah, Venus does like
everything stops and it starts rotating around her for a little bit. So, you know, the month ends up in a real interesting way. And of course, as we enter the main month of Leo, which is August, that's the month with no holidays, because the whole month is essentially a holiday.
That's true. So. I'm glad you mentioned the Black Box Day, because you know, a lot of times people look at that and just their knee-jerk reaction is, oh, a black box, that's a bad day. But it's not. It's just one that doesn't really support any kind of new action. So, I always feel bad if somebody says, oh, my birthday is July 2nd and it's a black box. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad day. It just means that there's not a lot of extra support from the moon or the aspects that are going on that day that would support something kind of outgoing, whereas the white circles are kind of helpers. They give you a lot of help in the direction that you want to go.
Push along, just move you forward, get the wind to your back, you might say. So,
thanks for stopping by, and see us again next month for another edition of Planetary Calendar.
Hi, now we're going to give you our little tip about astrology, a little bit of education about how it works, and we're going to do what's called walking around the signs.
A lot of times people say, I really don't have any understanding about astrology, and isn't there sort of a quick way that you can, learn a little bit about astrology so that you don't feel so lost when you look at things like the calendar, or you look at, you listen to people talking about astrology. And so one of the simplest tools that you can use is your imagination, and imagine the circle of the horoscope, and imagine that at the first house, which is the natural house for Aries, the first sign, imagine there's a person drawn on that circle, and they're doing a back bend, so much so that their head is touching their toes. So they're really in a circle. And in the first house of Aries is the head, and that's where you begin the zodiac. And you think about things with your head, or your identity, or your presence, or your
face,
physical presence, and your face. That's right. And those are things that are sort of issues of the first house and related to the sun sign of Aries. And then as we go around the circle following the contour of the body, you're going to get next, the second house is going to be the natural house of Taurus, and we're at the throat area.
Right.
Taurus is related to the voice, beautiful sound, music, taste, all these different things. And so you know a little bit about Taurus, and you know a little bit about the second house when you think about it being the house of sort of resources.
Exactly. In other words, the houses are actually positional. The houses have to do with where you were born, or where the chart is cast for, and the first house, the eastern horizon, is the beginning of the first house. They call it the ascendant. That's why it has to do with how you appear. The ascendant is how you appear. It's how you start your day. Your eyes pop open, and suddenly you're there. It's about consciousness.
And to add another dynamic to this whole teaching circle is the fact that as we go through the signs and the houses, we're also aging. Yeah. So in other words, Aries is the newborn.
Right.
It's the baby as it enters the world, their first interface with the horizon, with the ascendant. Right. And at each step of the way, it gathers these other attributes and gets older in the process.
Right.
So the second house is things, ownership, grabbing onto things. Well, what does the baby do? The first thing it learns how to do is grab onto your finger or grab onto a rattle, and we say that one of the significant words for the second house is mine. It's possessions and things. Taurus. And that's kind of the first of interaction of the newborn baby with its environment.
What is mine? Taurus. What is mine? You may find many people who have strong Aries in their chart oftentimes in what? Sales. They love to interact with people. People who have strong Taurus in their chart tend to be in things that like real estate, things that they're going to own. Also in art galleries, these are possessions that are beautiful.
Right.
What is beautiful to you? What matters to you? And food is one of the first things the baby thinks of after I'm here. And that's Taurus for you. Many chefs are Taurus.
And then taking this idea of the baby developing into a full-grown human being, we have the next house, the third house, the natural house of Gemini. Mm. And what's sort of the next stage in the evolutionary process? Yeah, it's pulling yourself up and starting to walk around a little bit, but staying in your neighborhood. It's also discovering that you can have a playmate.
Right.
So there's that Gemini
The
twin
twins,
thing. It's
right.
siblings. So you think about the third house is, kind of playful, but it's communication because you've got to be able to communicate to your sibling, no, that's mine.
Right.
Or here you want to share, or let's play, or those kinds of things. It's also communication and short distance travel, and it rules the arms.
The arms, and also to a certain extent the hands, because
Right.
it has to do with they grab you. That's in Gemini, and people who like Gemini, for instance, oftentimes, and it's also mobility. It's about when they first start moving around, they start crawling
Scooting.
around. It's local travel because what? They're crawling. They're crawling on all fours, and so Gemini in the third house relate a great deal to local movement, local travel. Doing your errands, not going on your vacations.
And when we teach about the fourth house and Cancer, we say that the baby is now sort of officially a part of the family. Until then, they're just a little accessory,
Yes.
like your Gucci handbag. They're
Little
adorable, but you have to tote them around everywhere. And
Yes.
by the time they develop in age enough to be part of the fourth house, they're a part of the family. And mom gets to say, go put that on the table, or go get me a bottle for your little sister, or something that brings them makes them aware that they are part of a family unit. It's not all about them, Aries.
Right.
It's not about what they have. It's not about
Their playmates.
their playmate, their sibling. It's a whole family unit. And that tells you a lot about the fourth house and Cancer, which
Right.
is the home, the mother.
Right. And the fourth house is also the line of what's called the IC, which is basically the point below your feet. It's the place where you feel most grounded. Home is always home is always home.
We use that point a lot in our feng shui work with our Euro
Exactly.
Bagua when we're teaching feng shui or doing consulting work.
Exactly. In other words, to feel comfortable in your home, you have to make sure that there are things all the way as far from the front door as you can get towards the middle of the wall. That's your home spot. That's where you feel most secure. And there should be something there that relates to your family.
Right. And then we move on to the fifth house.
Yes.
The fifth house is the fun house.
Yes. Leo.
It's Leo. It's the natural house of Leo, and it has to do with how you express yourself in the world. It's artistic, it's creative, it's playful, it's fun, it's romantic. We've progressed a little bit in our societal imperatives, but it used to be the place where a child used to learn to play an instrument so they could be the entertainment on Saturday nights with the family. So it's a lighthearted, very heartfelt because it's ruled by the sun, and so it's a very sort of open heart energy. It rules the heart in the body, and so this is a very important part, to remember, especially when you go through situations or times in your life when you feel like I just don't have the heart for it. You need to activate that Leo energy in your chart or in your bagua, in your environment, in feng shui, to build that heart up again.
So when you look at the fifth house in a person's chart, you're looking at what gives them joy. And that's always important. What gives you joy?
That's very important.
Yes.
So now we get to the sixth house, and this is kind of a preparation, like Ralph talked about the IC. We have another point here now that's the ascendant, descendant axis. And so all six of the houses that are below the ascendant, descendant are below the horizon, literally below the horizon, unseen, private. This is your home life. And the sixth house kind of prepares you to step over that line into the outer world. So the sixth house is work, it's study, it's school, it's co-workers, it's hygiene, it's being prepared. It's why your mother says wear clean underwear when you go out. Something could happen. You could end up at the hospital. They'll think I'm a bad mother. So it's being prepared. But if we talk about romance and love and relating to other people, and the reason I'm getting to that is that's right over the line in the seventh house. There's really three houses that have a relationship to that. So The fifth house is kind of joy and the anticipation of romance, dating.
Yeah.
The sixth house is where you take care of yourself and you decide whether or not the person that you're dating is someone who you would get up in the middle of the night and take care of if they were sick.
Right.
And it's also a house that makes you take care of your own personal health.
Yes.
Because if you wouldn't do it for yourself, you might do it for that other person who's sort of tugging at your heartstrings in the fifth house.
Right. Traditionally, that sixth house is that point when all of the girls and the mom and the mother-in-law or future mother-in-law are all preparing the bride just before the ceremony. Mm-hmm. And the ceremony is the descendant or the cusp of what's called the seventh house.
Yeah, the seventh house, people have, when we do consultations, people do consultations because they're concerned about money in their life, their career, their job, their ability to earn income, or love. Or sometimes they come to us for love, and then as they're walking out the door, they ask about money. But those are really the two big issues,
yeah.
right? Well, it's interesting because the seventh house seems to be the one that people focus on for relationships. And that's a little bit of a misnomer because the seventh house is really about commitment. It's sign on the dotted line. It's make a partnership. It could be a legal partnership or a business partnership as easily as it could be a marriage partnership. It's the wedding where the fifth house is planning the wedding and having the idealism of the relationship. The seventh house is the formalizing of that. But it is where you reach across the threshold and you say, I want to make a commitment to this idea, this person for a lifetime.
Right.
And that the world is bigger than just me and all this stuff that's going on in the background for me. And so it really is kind of a rite of passage into adulthood.
Because you marry not only the person, you marry their family.
And of course it's Libra, the balancing scales. So this is the first time really that you say, in all the other houses, it's all about me. I am, I have, I share, all these things are personalized, and now it becomes all the houses that are above the horizon become the we houses. And that Libra describes that pretty dramatically.
And not surprisingly, Libra and the seventh house rule legal issues.
Right.
Of course,
so
the scales.
A legal relationship.
Exactly. And now that you're a couple, in the seventh house, you move on to the eighth house.
It's not as scary as it sounds.
No.
The eighth house makes you realize that formalizing this relationship gives you responsibilities. So in many ways, Scorpio, the eighth house ruler, is about being old enough to stand up to your responsibilities, to take responsibility for your actions. They always say that voting, for example, is a very scorpionic thing because it's taking your personal power and combining it with the power of the whole for an outcome. So Scorpio very often looks at things that people are queasy about looking at, don't want to have aired out in public, but it's the responsible thing to do. You have to look at the past to prevent problems in the future. You have to look at the unseen things that may be undoing you. And so this is a very transformational house. So you really go from, again, that childhood experience of me, into that, I may have personal power, but if I combine that with my sense of the world and community, I'm going to be a lot more effective.
The eighth house is where you find out about all those secrets and those parts of life that were secret that your parents would say, oh, you're a child, you don't need to know about this now. So it's about birth and death.
Well, it's the ruler of the reproductive organs.
Exactly.
And so this is a power that maybe you don't even realize you have until you get to this stage in your development. And so, again, the responsibility for that great kind of power comes with that eighth house in Scorpio.
Right, those transformational times, those times of intense participation where you're involved with other people and you're totally vulnerable to other people.
And then we go on to the ninth house, Sagittarius.
Yes.
long distance travel. Many times when people go for higher education or postgraduate degrees, that's the first time that they travel significant distances away from their home. And they get to, I don't know who I'm quoting, but there's a sayer of great sayings that said, don't tell me how much you've studied, tell me how much you've traveled. In that travel is the great teacher, the great educator, that you could learn a lot from books or classes, but once you travel, you start to learn about the human condition and that it's not the same everywhere, and you stretch yourself.
Like for instance, where Gemini in the third house are languages, your native language, what they call your milk language. The ninth house is foreign languages.
And Sagittarius rules the muscles.
Yep.
You know, so you're stretching your muscles in areas where you haven't before.
You're walking long distances. You know, the archer, and it's the centaur, it's the archer. It's the ability to use tools to attain a target at great distance.
So all of these things that you've learned in all these houses all start to build up and create this body of knowledge. And in the ninth house, you know, you're starting to regard yourself as a resource, as someone to go to for your knowledge or your expertise, or to develop the learning that will make you a resource for others.
In fact, the ninth house, the 10th house, and the 11th house are three of the houses that relate most to your position in the outside world. We always like to say that it's basically the ninth is what you know, the 10th is how you're known, and the 11th is who you know.
And so we progress on to the 10th house, and that's kind of, you know, your flag that you wave out in the world saying, oh, here I am, this is what I do. A lot of times when people you meet someone for the first time, they say, oh, what do you do? You know, you say, oh, I'm a chef, or I'm an astrologer, or I'm a teacher. You know, it's not who you are, but it's what you do.
Right.
It's how you're known out in the world. And that's what the 10th house in Capricorn is all about. And a lot of times they talk about, you know, the 10th house or Capricorn being sort of that knowledgeable person, you know, that you know, revered resource out in the world.
The white
you know,
beard.
I mean,
Yes.
the white beards. There you go.
Yeah, right. Because it is, and it typically relates to your elders, people who are knowledgeable and have experience in the world. It's Capricorn. Capricorn is seen as, you know, it's ruled by Saturn, you know, which is what's considered the most beautiful of the planets, and it has to do with limitation. It's the importance of limiting yourself. Where Jupiter in Sagittarius is always expansive, Saturn is compressive.
And then we get to the 11th house, which is your community. You know, what good is all this knowledge that you have and this reputation that you have if you can't share that with people? So it's kind of finding how you connect with the world. And interestingly, as, you know, time has modernized, you know, the 11th house and its ruler Aquarius have come to be connected with the internet and this more global community that we have now. And so that gives you an idea about 11th house issues as well. It's also income earned from your daily work, because who pays you the income but the community that you connect with?
Exactly, your friendships, you know, the organizations that you're connected to.
And then we're full circle. We're at the 12th house. We're in the natural rulership of Pisces, rules the feet. So we've got now the toes touching the head. And we have the old man of the zodiac. And this is, if the 9th house is seeking knowledge, the 12th house is possessing knowledge. And it goes from the first house saying, oh, here I am, I'm all there is, to the 12th house saying, I am but a speck. I'm just a drop in the ocean. And so it's this knowingness that comes out of making this whole trip around the zodiac.
And Pisces oftentimes is a sign that shows up in people who tend to have a huge vision or a great vision. They look way beyond themselves.
Seekers, intuition, spirit are all connected with this house.
Exactly. So that's the walk around the zodiac.
Hope it gives you a little bit of a shorthand when people are talking about signs or houses.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.